Have you ever stopped to wonder how a single moment, a single act, can change the story of a lifetime? We live in a world of rushing footsteps, of doors opening and closing, of strangers passing by without a second glance. Faces blur in the crowd, voices fade into the noise, and yet, hidden behind wary eyes, there are untold stories. Stories of hunger, of heartbreak, of silent prayers whispered into the cold night. But what if, one ordinary evening, as the rain tapped against your window, and the world outside seemed so distant, there came a knock at your door? A frail hand trembling. A voice, barely above a whisper, asking not for wealth, not for gold, not even for comfort, but simply for a piece of bread. And what if, opening that door didn't just feed an empty stomach, but unlocked a destiny greater than you could ever imagine? This is not just a story about a beggar. This is a story about the power of compassion. A story about how kindness can rewrite the future in ways the heart can barely comprehend. Seth. Her name was Anna Grace. She wasn't rich. She wasn't famous. In fact, to most people, Anna was invisible. Just another ordinary woman living in a quiet corner of the city. She worked long hours at a small bakery, her hands always smelling faintly of flour and warm bread. Her life was simple, but not easy. Every morning, she rose before the sun, whispered a short prayer, and walked through the narrow cobblestone streets to earn a living that barely covered her rent. Anna carried a heart full of dreams, but also a weight of sorrow. Years ago, she had lost her parents in a car accident, and with no siblings or close relatives, she learned to live alone. On the outside, she smiled at her customers, greeting each one with warmth, but when the bakery lights dimmed and the day came to an end, she returned to a small, dimly lit apartment where silence echoed louder than any voice. Sometimes, she would sit by the window, Bible in her lap, eyes scanning words of hope and faith, while her heart wrestled with loneliness. She believed in God's plan, but there were nights she questioned it. Why had life been so harsh? Why did love and comfort seem so distant? And yet, Anna never allowed her pain to harden her heart. She carried within her a gentle kindness, an ability to notice the small things others ignored. The tired mother struggling with groceries, the old man counting coins at the counter, the hungry child pressing his face against the bakery glass. She gave where she could, even when she had so little herself. But beneath that kindness was a woman quietly longing for connection, for meaning, for a sign that her life mattered in the grand story of the world. Seth. Anna's life looked ordinary to the world, but inside, it was a battle no one saw. Her apartment was a single room with cracked walls, where the winter wind slipped through the windows and the heater rattled like an old man coughing. Most evenings, she would return home with tired feet and aching hands, placing a small loaf of bread on the table, the same bread she baked and sold all day. Sometimes, that bread was her only dinner. There were moments when the silence in her apartment felt heavier than the hunger in her stomach. She would sit at the little wooden table, staring at the empty chair across from her, imagining what it would be like if someone sat there. A friend, a husband, even just a neighbor who cared. But the chair always remained empty. Her heart longed for connection, but life had taught her to expect very little. Birthdays passed without phone calls. Holidays came without invitations. And yet, every Sunday morning, Anna walked to the small church at the end of the street. She sat in the back pew, folding her hands quietly, listening to hymns that carried promises of hope. "Lord," she would whisper, her eyes closed, "I don't ask for riches or fame. I only ask for strength to keep going, and maybe, if it is your will, for someone to remind me that I am not alone." Though life often seemed unkind, Anna still believed in kindness. When a child from the neighborhood knocked on her bakery door after hours, she would slip him a roll of bread. When an old woman forgot her wallet, Anna covered the cost without a word. These were small gestures, unnoticed by the world. But to Anna, they were her way of holding on to faith. Her way of saying, even in my emptiness, I can give. But even the kindest hearts can grow weary. And though Anna never spoke it aloud, there were nights when tears wet her pillow, when she looked toward the ceiling and wondered, how long must she walk this lonely road? Winter came early that year. The bakery's old oven broke down for nearly a week, cutting her hours in half. Anna's paycheck, already so small, shrank even further. Rent was due, the electricity bill piled up, and some nights she lit a single candle because she couldn't afford to keep the lights on. She tried to stay strong, but each step seemed heavier than the last. The streets outside were full of Christmas decorations, shining lights, families holding hands, children laughing as they pointed to gifts in store windows. Anna watched from a distance, her breath visible in the cold air, and felt the sting of being unseen. One evening, she returned home with nothing in her stomach but a cup of tea she had stretched from an old tea bag. She sat by the window, her Bible open, but her eyes blurred with tears. The words of comfort she once clung to now slipped through her like water through trembling fingers. "Why, Lord?" she whispered into the empty room. "Why do I feel so forgotten? I give, even when I have little, but still, the emptiness remains." Her chest tightened with a pain only the lonely understand. A silent ache that gnaws at the soul when days blur into nights, and no one calls your name. No one asks if you're okay. That night, Anna lay awake listening to the wind howl through the cracks of her apartment. Hunger growled quietly in her stomach. Loneliness weighed heavier than any hunger. She turned on her side, clutching the edge of her blanket, wishing, just wishing, that someone, somewhere, would see her. But morning came, just as it always did. She rose, washed her face with cold water, and forced a smile before stepping into the world. To her customers, she was the cheerful baker. To her neighbors, she was simply the quiet girl upstairs. But no one saw the battle behind her eyes. And as the days stretched into weeks, Anna began to feel her hope slipping away, like sand falling through her hands. She wondered if life would ever change, or if this emptiness was all that waited for her future. It was a night colder than most. The wind howled through the streets, rattling the shutters of Anna's small apartment. She had just placed her last candle on the windowsill, its soft glow pushing back the shadows of the room. Wrapped in her thin blanket, she whispered her evening prayer, her voice breaking with quiet tears. And then it came. Knock. The sound startled her. At this hour, no one ever came. The neighborhood was silent, the streets nearly deserted. For a moment, Anna froze, her heart racing. Who could it be? Cautiously, she rose and walked to the door. Her hand trembled as she unlocked it, and when she pulled it open, she was met with a sight that made her breath catch. An old man stood there. His clothes were torn, his shoes nearly falling apart. His face was weathered with lines of hardship, and his hands shook from the biting cold. His eyes, though tired, carried a gentleness that pierced through the night. "I'm sorry to disturb you," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "But, do you have a piece of bread? Just a little, to help me through the night." Anna's first instinct was silence. She had so little herself. In her kitchen, there was nothing left but a single loaf of bread, her breakfast for the next day. For a moment, she hesitated, the weight of her own hunger pulling her back. But then, something stirred inside her. That quiet voice she had prayed to for so long. She looked at the old man, really looked, and saw not just a beggar, but a soul worn by the storms of life, a soul asking for kindness. Without a word, she stepped aside, walked to her table, and brought him the loaf. She placed it in his trembling hands. "Take it," she said softly. "It's all I have, but tonight, you need it more than me." The man's eyes filled with tears. His lips quivered as he whispered, "God bless you, child. You have given me more than bread tonight." And as he turned and disappeared into the night, Anna stood at the doorway, the cold wind brushing against her face. She felt empty, her stomach growling louder than ever. But strangely, her heart felt full. She had no way of knowing that opening that door was not the end of her story. It was the beginning. The days passed, and Anna thought little more of the encounter. Hunger still gnawed at her, bills still piled up, and her life seemed unchanged. Yet deep inside, she carried a quiet peace, the memory of the old man's trembling smile reminding her that kindness mattered, even in the smallest form. 1 week later, as the bakery doors opened, a man stepped inside. He was dressed neatly now, his face washed and eyes brighter than before. Anna almost didn't recognize him. It was the beggar. He walked to the counter, and before she could speak, he smiled gently. "I came not for bread today," he said, his voice stronger than she remembered. I came to give thanks. Confused, Anna tilted her head. The man continued, You see, I wasn't just a beggar. I had once been a baker myself, long ago. Before life tore everything away from me. That night, when you gave me your only bread, you didn't just feed my hunger. You reminded me of who I used to be. You reminded me that compassion still exists in this world. I went to the church the next morning, and for the first time in years, I prayed with hope. And now, I have come to offer you something. From his coat pocket, he pulled out a folded letter. With trembling hands, Anna opened it. Her eyes widened as she read. The letter was from a friend of his, the owner of a larger bakery in the city. A position was open, and he had recommended Anna. Her knees grew weak as tears blurred her vision. In that moment, she realized. Her kindness had returned to her, not in the same form, but multiplied beyond what she could imagine. That single act of sacrifice, the night she gave away her last loaf of bread, had not just changed a hungry man's life. It had changed her future. And so, Anna learned a truth the world often forgets. Sometimes the greatest miracles come not through what we keep, but through what we give away. For kindness, once released, always finds its way back, like a seed planted in the soil of the human heart, blossoming when the time is right. It wasn't wealth or fame that changed Anna's life, it was a single knock at the door, answered with kindness.